everybody!
Roughly 10 months ago at the time of recording, I released a video predicting which games would appear in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection. As of November 27th, it would appear the list of games included in said collection has leaked, thanks to copies for the Switch version being out in the wild for Taiwan and Hong Kong.
No! No!
Now do take this with a grain of salt, as these types of things can easily be faked. However, given I've spoken to some of my industry insiders in the past few weeks about what games were to be included, they pretty much confirmed this list for me, so I'm apt to believe this is the final one. If they end up being wrong, I'll take the loss and admit they were wrong and I was fed faulty information. However, given their accuracy for Nihon Falcom and other Japanese-based games, I doubt the list will be all that different. So what games have been included? We have the first two Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters games, which makes sense as these are the earliest examples. We also have Monster Capsule GB, Dark Duel Stories, Battle of Great Duelists, Dungeon Dice Monsters, The Eternal Duelist Soul, Duel Monsters 6, Expert 2, The Sacred Cards, Reshef of Destruction, Worldwide Edition Stairway to the Destined Duel, World Championship 2004, Destiny Board Traveler, and 7 Trials to Glory World Championship Tournament 2005. That's a fairly substantial list, and there are some glaring omissions of course, namely, it lacks all of the home console games, ranging from the PlayStation 1 era right through to the PS2, original Xbox, and GameCube era. When fans think of Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games, they're either going to think of the Game Boy Advance titles or the console ones coming out when the Battle City and Virtual World arcs were airing in English. I'd argue out of any point in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, that was when the game was at its most popular, given it was airing as part of the Saturday morning block on Fox Kids, as well as WB Kids, meaning it was getting younger millennials and the older part of Gen Z watching it. For those who aren't into sociology, millennials and baby boomers are by far the two largest generations by size. I'd argue that's part of why we saw such a boom in anime during the late 90s and early 2000s. Admittedly, this is beside the point. Given the list of games released, I'd say this tells us Konami are simply using the handheld games to test the waters for future Yu-Gi-Oh! Collections. If this one does well, we'll likely see an Early Days Collection 2 focused entirely on the home console releases, since they're fewer in number, but of course will take up more space. Given this collection is going to only have a Switch and PC release, it makes a bit of sense as to why Konami would prioritize the handheld games over the full console releases. Spoiler alert, it's not because of the PC crowd. While I don't have hard numbers, a lot of people play their Switches in handheld mode because they either want to game well in bed, which I'll admit is how I use my PlayStation Vita and still do from time to time. Also, speaking of the Vita, it would appear Sony are going ahead with a successor of sorts. I've got a video discussing my thoughts on this in the works, so hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell if you don't want to miss that one. But Konami clearly intends this collection to be aimed more at the Switch crowd than the PC players, given these games were originally on Nintendo handhelds, where they sold really well. These Yu-Gi-Oh! Games were clearly designed with the gamer on the go in mind, with their pick-up-and-play nature and being able to dip in and out of playing rather easily. Hell, I played Stairway to the Destined Duel all the time when I was waiting for long hours in doctors' offices on my Game Boy Advanced SP. Not only was it fast-paced enough that I wouldn't get bored, but given the grindy nature of the title, I could grind for cards that I needed for my decks for hours rather easily. But let's explore this collection a little bit deeper and whether I think it'll succeed or be such a critical fail that Konami are not just shooting themselves in the foot, but also stabbing themselves in the process. Now I don't need to state the obvious, but considering the average YouTube viewer has a low attention span and pudding for brains, I feel I have to. If this collection is a success, we will of course get more games. If it's not, then we can wave goodbye forever to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Games that aren't playable on modern systems. And that'd be a real shame. Considering Yu-Gi-Oh! Games, even the very experimental ones, are a ton of fun, even if they get panned by the critics. Just look at the scores for Duelist of the Roses, but look at the community's love for it. Hell, Forbidden Memories was panned critically too, and has even found a speedrunning community. But considering how strong the games on offer actually are, I think this collection has a good chance of being a runaway success. It offers some of the weirder games like Capsule Monsters, along with Dungeon Dice Monsters, both of which I feel could have taken off in their own right had they been marketed better. Plus, you have the really weird and experimental card games released when Takahashi-san didn't know what the rules were going to be for the real card game. He said in multiple interviews that he was making up the rules as he went along to service the narrative, which is why you got some weird as hell games like Dark Duel Stories and some of the other titles that didn't follow the rules of the TCG. Admittedly, there was less reason to release these weird and experimental games like Sacred Cards or even Reshef of Destruction, as the TCG had long since established rules by this point in time. So not only are you getting the weird and wonderful Yu-Gi-Oh games, you're also getting ones that play like older formats, such as Stairway to the Destined Duel and the 2 championship games. Meaning you'll actually satisfy the GOAT format players. They're so miserable, you'd think. Maybe they'll touch grass, find a nice partner, and no longer be as miserable as the GOATs they probably love so much. Also including Destiny Board Traveler is interesting as it's one of the more obscure games, and is unique even by the standards of Yu-Gi-Oh titles that trend towards being weird. I never got to play it, so I can't comment on its quality. But it's always nice to have those kinds of games included, given a lot of people would have had piecemeal experiences with these games over the course of their childhoods. Off those reasons alone, I'd say this collection is going to be a success, and Konami will likely get to work on a follow-up with the console games. If that does well, we'll probably get a few GX-era collections, followed by some 5Ds collections too. So given what we know, should you buy the Early Days collection if this so-called leak winds up being real? I would say yes. This collection isn't a full-price game. For the physical Switch version, it's $70 Canadian, making it not a full-price release, and you're getting a ton of games. From that standpoint, you're getting a lot of value, though this is admittedly aimed at 90s kids who are approaching middle age more than it is for the newer fan. But considering that's still the core fanbase of Yu-Gi-Oh, it kinda makes sense. You have to appease them as much as you do the weeb. Speaking of, I will be launching Appease the Weeb merchandise in the very near future, so do keep your eyes peeled for it. Maybe pick it up to support the channel further. Also, as I stated earlier in this video, if you support this collection, we'll get a console collection in the future, and that's where the really interesting Yu-Gi-Oh games are, because none of them have a set style, and they all do different things. Those are primarily the games I have the fondest memories of. Duelist of the Roses is one of my all-time favorite games, because it was just so weird. It sticks out to me as a game. Also, I have to conquer the mountain that is Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories at some stage, as I never actually beat it when I was a kid, not because I didn't understand the game, but because I would always get bummed draws right at the end, and then my ass would get absolutely destroyed, and I'd rage quit for a while, because you had to go through a gauntlet of fights just to get back to that one, and it was an absolute slog towards the end of the game. Which is why this collection is so exciting, and why a future one will be too. Likely Konami will incorporate some awesome quality of life improvements, such as save states, which are basically a requirement for re-releases of old titles like these, as they are typically rather unforgiving towards the player. So are you excited for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection? Do let me know in the comments, and like the video if you've enjoyed it. Thanks go out to my current channel members, R. Campbell and Danny Boy. If you want early access to videos and exclusive content, then click the join button or the link in the description. Now go and check out my predictions video on what games I thought would be in this collection. You can point and laugh where I was dead wrong. Or you can check out the video YouTube thinks you'll like the most. Just click something, and until next time, keep blazing that trail.